Sophie leaped towards the dragon temple, and Jacob followed her enthusiastically. The golden eaves of the temple were soaking up the last bit of the afternoon sun, and the entire structure was gleaming. Since it was afternoon and the temple was situated on top of the mountain, there weren't any visitors. As there were no cable cars, only people who were fit and determined, like Jacob and Sophie, were able to visit the temple at this hour. Otherwise, one would have to start climbing early in the morning in order to arrive here by noon, and then spend the entire afternoon getting back down. Besides, the temple was kept a secret from the mortals, and no one except the Dragon Clan visited this serene place. Due to such odd hours, Sophie and Jacob didn't run into any visitors. In the yard of the Dragon Temple, volunteers were sweeping up fallen leaves. Sophie, who was yelling and shouting with excitement on her way in, had become quiet as soon as she stepped into the temple. The paving bricks in the yard were of different colors and had been put together to create a massive meditative pose. In the southwest corner of the yard, there was a tall, ancient pine tree. Jacob knew that this must be the 1,000-year-old tree Dracon had mentioned. With a heart filled with respect, he walked over to it calmly. As the temple did not have many visitors, the ancient tree had not been kept inside a fence. It had quietly taken its place in the corner of the yard. Jacob walked up and reached out his hand, gently caressing its trunk, which was full of senescence and fortitude. Its bark was rock solid and smooth. From its outer appearance, it did not even look like wood anymore. Jacob began running the concentration cultivation scroll and was becoming aware of nature's essence nearby. He was actually able to receive a burst of condensed wood essence from the rigid bark of the ancient pine tree. Moreover, the dragon core inside his body seemed to have resonated with the ancient tree, as Jacob could feel it vibrating inside of him. The warm and humid energy flow had traveled through Jacob's arms and towards the interior of the tree. At the same time, the ancient tree was also emitting a burst of wood essence towards Jacob, nourishing his body. Sophie watched Jacob quietly. She understood that he must be having an enlightening moment and did not want to interrupt him. After a full minute, Jacob withdrew his hand and breathed out heavily. The fatigue that he felt from climbing up the mountain had completely vanished. Instead, all that was left in him was pure strength and liveliness. With his heart full of reverence, Jacob slightly bowed to the ancient tree. Jacob noticed that Sophie had become dazed watching him. He called to her with a smile, "Let's go!" For a few seconds, Sophie could not react properly. She couldn't help but let out a sigh and start following Jacob's footsteps. As she passed through the yard and entered the main palace, she was finally herself again. The smile that Jacob just gave her lingered in her mind, and she suddenly felt her heart flutter. Jacob didn't even realize how gently he had just smiled at Sophie. Upon entering the main palace, he raised his head to observe a larger-than-life statue of a former dragon king. The main palace was giving off a grand and magnificent, solemn, and awe-inspiring atmosphere. It had instantly made Jacob feel that this visit was well worth their effort and time. Sophie was following Jacob closely. Being surrounded by solemn-looking statues had frightened her a little. Through the main palace, they walked into another yard. There was a stone hut to the east of the yard, and inside of the hut stood a stone monument that seemed to have been there forever. Somehow, after the enlightenment at the ancient tree, Jacob suddenly felt that Dracon had told them about the ancient tree and the stone monument on purpose. Jacob stood in front of the stone monument and began reading carefully the text inscribed on it. "It is everlasting and cannot be named. It is the original void of non-being. This oneness is the essence of a dragon, which is invisible and formless. It may be regarded as vague and intangible. When the oneness comes forward, its front cannot be seen. When one tries to follow it, one cannot see its rear. Abiding with the original scriptures, one can master the presence. No matter how hard Jacob tried, he was only able to make sense of a couple sentences. Standing next to Jacob, Sophie was also reading the words on the monument in silence. If desire shall conceal true self will manifest itself even more. If desire shall weaken the true self will strengthen itself even more. If desire shall abandon the true self will prosper even more. If desire shall deprive the true self will give even more. This is known as the enlightened nature that is subtle yet profound. Gentleness overcomes strength, and the meek overcomes the strong. The more Jacob read, the more difficult it was for him to understand. Likewise, with her brows deeply furrowed, Sophie seemed to be having a hard time deciphering it herself. This was the way to command water, thought Jacob. Suddenly, a sense of enlightenment crossed his mind. It was as though an awareness had risen from the bottom of his heart. It was about to break through his chest and reach for his head. Jacob then thought of the prosperousness and liveliness of the ancient tree again. It reminded him of the times when he was working on math problems. He felt as though his thinking was now finally on the right track and was about to be able to solve a challenging problem. Water gives life and nourishes all things on earth. Water breaks through and overcomes all impediments, he said out loud. An unexpected bell had abruptly interrupted Jacob's reflection. Sophie, who was lost in her own thoughts, had also jumped at the loud noise. Jacob turned around and looked at his phone. He realized that they had spent precisely half an hour standing in front of this stone monument. The continually falling leaves had found homes on the tops of their heads and their shoulders, and the young volunteers who were performing cleaning chores had also returned to rest. Jacob and Sophie were now alone in this empty yard. "It is quite late now. Let's start heading back," Jacob said. "Okay," Sophie responded obediently. It seemed that her thoughts were still with the writings on the monument. Jacob reached out and shook off the leaves that had fallen in Sophie's hair and on her shoulders. Sophie was caught off guard by this gesture and only looked at Jacob as he continued picking the leaves stuck to her hair. "This guy is actually quite nice to me," Sophie secretly thought to herself. On the other hand, Jacob did not put much thought into his gesture. He looked down and patted off the leaves on himself before leading Sophie out of the front gate. Dusk made the mountain look even more beautiful, and the last beams of sunlight were lighting up the sky like a painting. "Let's head down quickly," Jacob urged Sophie as he realized that it would soon be dark and it would become difficult to descend. Sophie nodded and followed him. The way down was less challenging than the way up. However, since the sun had gone down considerably, it affected their visibility. As they could not see the steps beneath their feet clearly, they had to move more cautiously and slowly. The trail was covered with moist grass, and stepping on them seemed like nature was playing its own kind of music. The gentle stream flowing nearby chimed into the song, and the gentle breeze kept billowing to create a beautiful rhythm of the mountain. Sophie and Jacob held hands as it grew dark. The atmosphere made them feel closer than ever, and they casually intertwined their fingers. They were returning not just with an improved relationship, but also with a lot more awareness. They seemed to have developed a more profound understanding of the knowledge that the ancient dragons had left behind. The dragon temple and pavilion stood far away in the seclusion of the endless green forest. Conveniently borrowing the views of nature, these structures had completely become one with the mountain and forest. Such a splendid sight was a great experience for Jacob and made him respect the elders who had meditated on this mountain. Jacob was immersed in the view around him as he walked and didn't realize when Sophie had let go of his hand. When he suddenly remembered and turned around to check on her, she wasn't there. Jacob rushed back the path he had just come from and began looking for Sophie.
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.